In the year 64 AD, a single Roman denarius contained roughly 95% pure silver. It was the most trusted coin in the world. Soldiers were paid in it. Merchants from Britain to Egypt accepted it without hesitation. It was the dollar of its day, the money an entire civilization ran on. Then something quiet began. The emperors started shaving the silver. Not all at once. A few percent here, a little less there. By the year 270 AD, that same denarius held less than 5% silver. The rest was cheap base metal, dressed up to look like wealth. Prices exploded. Soldiers demanded payment in grain and gold instead of coins. Trust evaporated. And within a few generations, the most powerful empire the world had ever seen collapsed into chaos. Most Romans never saw it coming. The coins still looked the same in their hands. The arenas were still full. The buildings still rose. But the money had already told the truth long before the empire admitted it. There was a man in those years, a vineyard owner named Lucius, the kind of ordinary, forgotten person history never bothers to write down. He noticed the coins were getting lighter. He noticed the same sack of grain cost more denarii every season. While his neighbors kept hoarding coins, trusting the system that had always worked, Lucius did something that looked foolish at the time. He traded his savings for land and for gold, real things that couldn't be diluted by an emperor's mint. His friends thought he was paranoid. His family thought he was throwing away good money. Lucius ignored them all. When the currency finally died and a lifetime of coins became worthless metal, his neighbors were ruined. But Lucius's land still grew grapes. His gold still bought bread. His family carried wealth across a collapse that erased almost everyone around them. He didn't predict the exact year of the fall. He didn't need to. He simply understood what the money was quietly telling him. Most people don't realize we're watching the same signals flash right now. Not a stock crash, not a recession headline, something deeper and slower. A transformation in the nature of money itself that has preceded the fall of nearly every great power in recorded history. And the number at the center of it is this: over $324 trillion. That's the total debt in the global financial system today, according to the Institute of International Finance. That's not a typo. $324 trillion is more than 3 times the combined economic output of every nation on Earth. It is a mountain of obligations that can only be sustained by one thing: the continuous creation of new money out of nothing. Today, I'm going to show you exactly what's happening to money right now, why these conditions mirror the precise pattern that preceded the collapse of empires before us, and the specific steps ordinary people are taking to protect and grow their wealth as the money quietly changes beneath their feet. The story of what happened after 64 AD illustrates exactly how money dies. It never dies in a single dramatic moment. It dies by 1,000 small cuts that feel normal while they're happening. Rome didn't announce the destruction of the denarius. Each emperor simply needed a little more to fund wars, to pay legions, to buy loyalty. So they minted more coins with less silver in each one. The mechanism was invisible to the average citizen, but the consequences were not. By the time of the crisis of the 3rd century, prices in parts of the empire had risen by over 1,000%. In the year 301 AD, the emperor Diocletian tried to fix it by force, issuing an edict that set maximum prices on goods and made overcharging punishable by death. It failed completely. You cannot legislate trust back into money once it's gone. The empire fractured, the economy reverted to barter in many regions, and the western half never recovered. Here's what most people miss. This wasn't a uniquely Roman failure. It is a repeating pattern that historians and economists have documented across centuries. Consider Spain in the 1500s. After conquering the Americas, Spain received the largest influx of silver in human history, galleon after galleon of treasure pouring into Europe. They should have become unstoppably rich. Instead, the flood of new silver triggered what historians call the price revolution. Prices across Europe rose roughly 6-fold over the century, and Spain, despite controlling more money than any nation on earth, defaulted on its debts repeatedly, at least 4 times under a single king. More money did not mean more wealth. It meant the slow destruction of the money's value, and an empire that bankrupted itself while drowning in treasure. Now consider the opposite. The Eastern Roman Empire, Byzantium, issued a gold coin called the solidus. For nearly 700 years, emperors refused to debase it. It held its gold content while kingdoms rose and fell around it. And for those same 700 years, Byzantium endured as the wealthiest, most stable economy in the medieval world. Then, in the 11th century, its rulers finally began cutting the gold content to fund their spending. Within decades, the empire entered a financial crisis it never fully escaped. The lesson is brutal and consistent. Sound money builds empires. Debased money buries them. The parallels to our own moment run deeper than most people are comfortable admitting. In every historical case, three conditions aligned. First, a government accumulated debts it could not possibly repay through honest means. Second, it turned to the printing of money as the only escape. Third, the population trusted the currency right up until the moment it failed. Look at where we stand. The United States national debt has crossed $36 trillion and continues to climb. The dollar has lost over 96% of its purchasing power since 1913. And in just 2 years during the recent crisis, roughly 40% of all the dollars that have ever existed were created, printed into being according to the Federal Reserve's own money supply data. We are not approaching the early warning signs. We are living inside them. The capital injection isn't silver shaved off a coin this time. It's digital, and it's vastly larger in scale. Where Rome diluted a metal, modern governments expand the money supply directly. The pandemic relief alone totaled trillions created from nothing. And just like the citizens of every collapsing empire before us, most people don't recognize what's happening because the money still looks the same. The bills in your wallet are unchanged. The numbers in your account still rise. But what those numbers can actually buy has been quietly eroding for years. This is the same illusion that fooled the Romans, the Spanish, and the Germans of the 1920s, when the Weimar Republic printed so aggressively that prices doubled every few days, and citizens carried wheelbarrows of cash to buy a single loaf of bread. Something people overlook about these events is how they feel while they're happening. They never feel like the fall of an empire. After 64 AD, Rome still held its games. The Colosseum still roared. Construction continued. Life felt normal, even prosperous for a long time. The collapse was decades of small erosions, not a single catastrophe. The same is true today. The markets reach new highs, the stores are full, the system appears to function. And that very normalcy is what disarms people. They mistake the absence of an obvious crisis for the absence of any problem at all. History suggests this is exactly the moment that matters most, when the money is changing, but the surface still looks calm. This is where most coverage of these warnings loses people. So let me be direct about the objection. You might be thinking, I'm not wealthy, I have nothing to protect. But that misunderstands the entire dynamic. The debasement of money isn't a tax on the rich. It is a silent tax on everyone who holds the currency, and it falls hardest on ordinary savers. When new money floods the system, the people who own scarce, productive assets are protected and even enriched. The people holding cash and waiting are quietly drained, year after year, without ever seeing a single withdrawal from their account. The opportunity isn't about having a fortune. It's about understanding which side of the debasement you choose to stand on. Lucius wasn't a senator. He was a man who grew grapes. He simply moved out of money that was dying and into things that endured. The second objection is timing. People want to know the exact moment to act, as if there's a perfect entry point. But monetary debasement has no bottom to time. It is a slow, continuous process that is already well underway and has been for decades. Waiting for a clearer signal means absorbing years of silent erosion while you hesitate. The third objection is that this all sounds like doom. It isn't. Empires fall, but individuals who understood money have always carried wealth across the rubble. This is not a story about catastrophe. It is a story about positioning. So, what does positioning actually look like? The pattern across history points to a clear framework. First, own assets that cannot be printed. Broad exposure to scarce and productive things, whether that's ownership in real businesses, land, or hard stores of value. Second, recognize that idle cash is the silent casualty of debasement. And don't let large sums sit still while their value quietly decays. Third, learn to think in real terms rather than nominal ones. A number that grows while its buying power shrinks is not actually growth. Fourth, hold some portion of your wealth in genuinely scarce assets that have preserved value across the death of every paper currency in history. This is precisely why gold has repeatedly broken record highs in recent years, crossing $3,000 an ounce, as institutions quietly do exactly what Lucius did. Fifth, develop a skill that holds its value in any currency, because human expertise is never debased. Sixth, extend your time horizon and think in decades, because these monetary shifts unfold over generations, not quarters. The information here is not secret. The Roman collapse is in every history book. The debt figures are published openly by the world's financial institutions. The money supply data comes from the central banks themselves. Just as in every previous era, the warning is in plain sight. And just as in every previous era, most people will not act on it. Not because they lack the information, but because the surface still looks calm and the coins still look the same. Lucius didn't know he was living at the edge of an empire's fall. He simply noticed that the money was changing and refused to pretend otherwise. The mechanism today is different. Digital instead of metal, global instead of imperial. But the pattern is identical, and the scale is larger than anything Rome or Spain or Weimar ever faced. The money is telling the same story it has always told before the great unwindings of history. You now know how to read it. What you do with that knowledge will determine whether you were one of the few who recognized what the money was saying, or one of the many who understood only after it was gone.